I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the podcast.
On this episode of Dirt Sailor the podcast, we will be discussing border safety issues, individuals crossing over, and Mexico's multi-billion-dollar demand. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine second Thursday in January 2024?
Doing good. How you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks for asking. It's been a nice week, another week of my kids being off of school, so I get to be off as well. I get to be off of homeschool mom duties, but I have been editing their podcast and posting it. So help the world, Ezra and Jadzia, if you're interested in listening to a podcast by kids for kids.
It's an awesome little podcast.
Other than that, just been trying to keep up to date on all of these news stories coming down.
There's too much. It's overwhelming.
It is. Do you think they're trying to overwhelm us because they've been dumping Epstein files?
I believe so. And that's like the last thing on my list today.
Epstein
and the file dumps and the disappointment in people's eyes and voices that there wasn't more there. There is more there. They're just not leaving the more there out.
Mm-hmm. They're leaving the really good stuff out. Instead, they'll say something like, "Oh, John Doe number 247 was mentioned 30 times," and then it will come out and say, "Did you ever see Trump?" So there's number one of Trump. Did you ever see Trump? No. Did you ever hear of Trump? No. Did you ever do business with Trump? No. Do you know if Epstein knew Trump? That whole thing. So you see the name Trump is no longer redacted. But it's just because in the Q&As that they had going on, they mentioned that name so many times.
Well, apparently, someone out in the world has posted pictures of Trump with little kids going to the island or something of that nature.
Oh, there was one where Trump is sitting next to Epstein on the Lolita Express, I believe it was.
Yes, and there's young ladies. He's going to the island to see young girls, and the pictures posted of the young girls, they're AI generated.
Oh,
Trump was never at that island. He was never with little girls. As a matter of fact, he despised Epstein. He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, because he started hitting on the under 18s, the children. Epstein was hitting on the children of the members of Mar-a-Lago.
Yes, and for those of you that are just piling on, it's fake news. It's not real.
So the one that I saw was Epstein and Trump sitting together on the plane, but it was photo edited for them to be sitting next to each other. Never happened. But they did do in the real number 3 document dump, are photos of young women, but not with Trump.
Right.
They're photos of young women.
And somebody blended those photos together through AI. And not only that, it's interesting that there's over 100 names named going to the island that were mostly on the other side of the aisle, yet
Democrats.
None of them have been named except for Bill Clinton.
Right, why not everybody else? And then the ones of the people that have come up, the names that came out, were claims by third parties that were being deposed, really, saying that Epstein said he was friendly with these people. Why aren't we getting the actual names of the people that were on the airplane? Why are we getting these depositions of nonsense? Because I can say I know Bill Clinton personally and met with him in the Oval Office, or met with Obama in the Oval Office, or met with Trump in the Oval Office. I could say that. Doesn't make it true.
Right. Well, as Muhammad Ali said when he was fighting, he used to do what was called the rope-a-dope, which was a very tricky means of sliding his feet and moving around and fighting. That's what we're getting here, is another government rope-a-dope. Because don't you think for a second that the CIA and other operational entities like that were not following Epstein? They were videoing themselves. They had listening ears on. They know what they know.
So remember when they raided Epstein's place in New York, they took photos during the raid to show what they were taking away, which was hard drives, computers, all of that. He had cameras in every room of his house, and yet none of those videos have been made public, and they were a part of Epstein's trial. What'd they do? When you ask them where are those videos, the government will say, I don't know, they're gone.
They're either gone or because of some minute case, they're sealed.
Right. Oh, well, you mean minute case? Like they have Clinton, to that they can exploit him or insert other big name people. I mean, what the head of JP Morgan, didn't they settle because they had enough on him? It was a pretty big settlement.
They had the goods. Just like Prince, was he a prince?
Yeah, he's the Prince Andrew.
Andrew, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't believe in prince and princess and king and queen. I think that's a far gone myth that should have never been perpetrated on another human.
Right, that somebody is better than somebody else and they're the all-knowing, should be making the decisions.
Somebody's bloodline is better than others. Then you get what you have with all these communist countries, like the leader in China, that I know they're not royalty, but he thinks he's royalty. He's better than everybody.
It's a dictatorship.
Yes.
Basically, you have a monarchy. And then right now, though, England gave up some of its power, but the power that it does have is to throw out the government and make them re-elect if it's not going the way they want it to go. So that's a pretty exceptional power right there.
Yes, and they only relinquished a little bit because the people were going to vote to totally do away with the monarchy. And if you look at the money they have in their savings and checking account,
billions,
I guarantee you they're not going to give that up.
Dirty money, too. I mean, they've been taking from people over how many years they get to control the land, take over the land. How many people lost their land thanks to the government? So why not, or the monarchy, why not give that back to the people?
Absolutely. I guess you'd have to go. You talk about paying reparations. How many countries around the world could sue England and say, you know what, you guys, along with Spain and Italy and other countries, did this during this era, did this during this era. But you know what? Let's not stop there. Let's go all the way back. And I know you and I have talked about this before, but let's go back to the Romans. Let's go way back. Let's figure out who took out the Incans and the Mayans, and let's take money from them.
Right. It could go on forever. If we wanted to, who has to pay money to whom?
I know that word. In perpetuity.
Yes, it could. So going on to things that have happened over the last week with it's a follow-up to one of the individuals that was in front of Congress and refused to denounce anti-Semitism on their campus and basically said that it's okay if people are calling death to Jews and wanting to just destroy them. So Harvard President Claudine Gay has resigned, not for what she said in front of Congress, but amid plagiarism claims. So it has been claimed that she did not give appropriate citations in her PhD dissertation.
Would that be cheating?
It would be a way of cheating. Now, some have said it was accidental and it wasn't her intention. Like
50 times?
She cited it elsewhere. She just forgot quote marks or things like that. But it meets even in 1997 standards and today's standards, Harvard wouldn't have or shouldn't have accepted it, is the claim. So now she is no longer going to be Harvard's president. She's going to go back to being a professor.
So then she didn't lose her job, technically.
No,
or her salary.
And she gets to keep her $900,000 a year salary. So if you're wondering why it's so expensive to get a university level education, that's going to be one of the reasons.
Well, yeah, we paid Joe Biden, not we personally.
Right, the University of, was it Pennsylvania or Delaware? Who had him? Delaware. And they paid $1 million.
Yeah, to have him be a professor.
And he didn't teach. He just was in name only, right?
Yes. Well, I'm sure there's a stigma there that the only reason that she was forced to resign was because she's a woman of color.
Yes. But if you look at the other university presidents, they went after them too. So it's not
and they were
Caucasian, I believe.
Caucasian folks, yes. And all these people on both sides of the aisle, all ethnic groups, all colors, all religions, all factions, need to quit trying to use their race and who they are as an excuse to not be terminated. Because there's several folks that have come forward with their work that was done, books written long before she was university president, and directly read the quotes she took right out of their books and out of their dissertations and out of their classroom sessions. So she may be a smart lady. She may be capable of getting a master's, bachelor's, doctorate, whatever, but she didn't do a lot of it honestly. And she's not the only one. I'm sure there's hundreds, if not thousands of them out there. That's why there's all this software, so you can have somebody else do your testing for you.
Well, what's funny is now they're calling for all people to get their dissertations run through AI software filters to see if any of it was plagiarized. And you have to keep in mind the software, though, isn't perfect. So they're going to have to double check what the software says, because there has been times where people have been written up at their school and threatened to be dropped from a program for cheating. And it turned out that the AI was wrong.
The AI was cheating.
The AI was cheating. So it's interesting. We'll follow up some more as if any more information comes to light. But another thing with our schools, there is a professor. I thought this was interesting, but there's a professor that is actually attempting to take university accreditation away from universities and place it onto individual scholars. So speaking of people who have PhDs, when you get your terminal degree and say you become a counselor, that certification attaches to you, the scholar and practitioner. When you're a doctor and you go through all of your qualifications, same thing, that attaches to you. And if you go into a secondary or a third practice of medicine, if you have sub-practices that you do, all of that attaches to you. So if you're at a hospital in Clovis or if you're at a hospital in San Francisco, you're the one that's board certified for those specialties, not the hospital per se. It's you that is certified. So a professor is now trying to get the accreditations attached to professors. So when a school applies for accreditation, they go and they look at all the professors, they look at all their papers, they look at all their publications, and they see what those individual professors did before they'll accredit the school to have that degree program or to have that level of accreditation. So this professor is claiming that it should attach to them and they can go anywhere they want and the accreditation stays. So if they want to become an individual private practitioner and teach someone in their home, they could do that as well. And that student could get credits for college.
It's actually pretty smart. That's like home study. Why not?
So I think if you can show the information, I don't disagree. I thought that this was a pretty
long as
pretty
there's
good
no
way.
Plagiarism or cheating.
Right.
Or you don't have somebody sitting in behind you doing your homework for you.
Yeah, no cheating. Definitely no cheating. But I thought that this is really interesting to have private practice professors and have the accreditations follow them, because the school really gets the accreditation based on the professors.
And therein lies the problem, because they make a grip of money on books and keys to open software.
Yes.
And the professors get paid pretty well, but not as much as the universities.
And in some cases, these professors, they've gone away with, they have some tenured professors, but they have a lot of teach one class, or, each class has a certain amount. And this professor was saying he would get $3,000, maybe a class per semester. So if he taught 5 classes, he would get $15,000 a semester. That's not that much money, but he's teaching 5 classes. So he thought that he would have 20 plus students per class. So if he had a student who wanted to pay $500, he could have 6 students make $3,000, and he has more of his time, but he can individualize it for these students. And he already has the information. He knows the textbook. He knows how to impart knowledge on these individuals.
So the end goal, the end result is to educate students. So
yes.
as long as it works, it should be a good thing.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was an interesting take.
Well, you just joggled my mind a little bit, something that I was thinking about like a week or two ago, and it just came to light. So we have a local college, Fresno State University.
Yes, we do.
And from what I understand, they're trying to get a tax measure passed. Again, to have a bunch of their buildings rebuilt, remodeled, replaced. And according to the person that they had speaking, they're $500 million behind on repairs. How is that possible?
Because they're spending it in all the wrong places, misappropriating.
Well, yes, but it's a living, breathing campus that has maintenance people, that has contracts, that should have to keep things up to a certain state or federal standard. So they should not be allowed to let things dilapidate to critical mass like that. And I love me some Fresno State football too, and basketball and soccer and baseball. And those stadiums look really nice. But I think you have to forego spending money on things like that to make sure that your campus, which is what you're supposed to be there for, is in good shape and ready to go.
Here in the United States, we turned our educational institutions into sports institutions that kind of do an educational thing in the background. Overall, we just spend too much money in the sports department. So maybe if we focused on educating people, we took away a bunch of these extras that people want. And people want to learn extra stuff. Do that in the community and have a community-related thing. Don't put it in the colleges.
Right. And please don't mishear me, people. I want Fresno State to have successful students. I want their campus to be above and beyond. But I don't want to continually pay taxes because the line they use, it's only, 38 cents per week per person. Then you pile on the Arch to Zoo tax. That's only 58 cents per week per person. Then you want to redo the roads. That's going to cost you $5 per week. Gas taxes. Property taxes. Where does it stop?
Well, it doesn't seem like it ever stops.
We have to throw the homeless in there. We need another billion. Break out another billion, Bob.
Right. And if you look at property taxes, if you have a home that here in Fresno County, if it's worth approximately taxable value $400,000, you're going to be paying about $5,000 a year in property taxes. Depending on where you are, Sanger is a little bit different from Clovis, which is a little bit different from Fresno, but that's $96.15 a week.
This is kind of in the same wheelhouse, kind of. Taxes, not education, but taxes and spending our money, the people's money. So there's all these free phones. They used to call them Obama phones, so I guess now they're Biden phones.
Biden phones, yeah.
But it was a law that was actually passed. I know I've said this before. It was passed by Bush in that Congress.
Yes.
And it was for rural areas to help them because they didn't have regular phone service. Well, then they just flipped this thing into, hey, let's give everybody that can't afford it a free phone. So if I go do the math and I figure out how much out of my paycheck I'm paying in taxes to pay for a phone for somebody, does that give me the right to track that person down and make sure they're treating my phone with the utmost respect?
No, you have no rights. As a taxpayer, it seems that how often are we told that we have no right? And it is the government knows better than us, and they'll tell us how they're going to use our money. And we have our sales tax here in the state of California, and part of that is where Measure Z, the zoo tax, cuts in. And then depending on where you live, like I said, if you're in a Clovis school district or Sanger Unified, they started tacking on all of their little measures. And depending on when your house was built in the area that you live in, you have Melrose. They they have little ways of telling us it's only a nickel, it's only a dime. But what are they doing? They're nickeling and diming us all over the place to the point where we're seeing tens of thousands of dollars go out. And if families actually had to cut checks instead of having it taken out of their paycheck, or most people have mortgage payments in which their taxes and insurance compounds, if they actually had to cut the check every time, if every April 15th you had to cut a check to the government, you would probably care more than when you just see it running in the background.
Yes. And the reason I bring up this phone idea or ideal is because I actually saw a person pushing a shopping cart today by Lowe's, one of the local Lowe's, and they stopped and they were on a phone. So I just kind of looked as I was walking by them into the store, and it looked like it could potentially be $1,000 phone. Now, don't get me wrong. I do not mind the homeless having phones. That is okay. I'm all right with it. Since our governments are fraught with waste and abuse, we should make sure that it's of a quality phone, that it's not $1,000 phone. Maybe it's a couple $100 phone, and it has certain features. Because if it helps them psychologically, it keeps them out of trouble, it keeps their mindset right, by all means, give them a phone that has a couple games on it or something.
Well, this goes to something that you've brought up before about how much do we spend on homeless. And I said, oh, I think it's a good cause. And then you broke down why a lot of these government programs or government funded programs, even towards nonprofits, where they're making $50,000 a month or hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and we're not seeing the homeless crisis solved. I think it's the same thing with the phones. Maybe the phone that you saw cost, I don't know, $500, but guaranteed it costs the government more than $500, which is costing us taxpayers more than the $500, because nothing costs what it costs. You and I, if we went shopping, we're going to go get the best deal. The government gets a contract and we get hosed every time.
Well, that's why I always ask that question, and I asked that question to a young lady yesterday. Do you feel that you're living in the greatest country on earth? And tongue in cheek, yes and no, because we have the potential. We had the potential. We were one of the best, the greatest, the mightiest in the world. We created opportunities that you couldn't get in a communist country, that you couldn't even get in England. That's why we broke off from them, to get our freedom. And we fought them, and we kicked their butts.
And then we became friends.
And then we became buds, just like we do with almost all countries. We went over and went to war with Vietnam. Okay, a million deaths on one side, potentially 500,000 on the other. We still don't know the true numbers. Now we have great normal relations. Same thing with Japan and all of them.
Right,
But,
World War II, we were not friends. Now we're friends.
At what cost to the citizenry? And I'm kind of spinning off on a soapbox, but where does it stop? How do we get control? How do we term limit these people? How do we stop the excess spending? They're spending like drunken idiots.
They are, and in fact, right now we keep hearing this every couple of months. It's crunch time. Congress has another showdown coming, right? We're gonna.
Oh my gosh, that was number 12 on my list. Here we go again.
Right. So, and do they have enough of the votes? Right now, the Republicans hold a very slim majority in the House, and we've talked about how it's gotten even smaller as time has gone on. But we have another interim bill. They're not calling it a full spending bill, and they're not calling it a continuing resolution. It's an interim bill to keep the government afloat. It is their job. And how often do you get to not do your job and keep your job? But the only people that can stop anyone in the House of Representatives from having a job, because this is where our bills start for funding Congress, Congress has to determine that that person is no longer going to be in Congress and vote them out, essentially. That's the only way to get them out, unless they resign themselves or unfortunately pass away. And what do we have? We have a Congress that barely held a congressman accountable for his bad actions. And as much as I wouldn't want to see a Republican go because that can sway who has the majority, I also didn't want to see him stay. He was corrupt and he's a liar. But the problem is, if we held everyone, all 434 other members of Congress, because that one was 435, other members of Congress to the same standard, Nancy Pelosi should be out with all of her stock trades, among other things.
That was number 10.
And then you could go person by person on all of the bad faith stock trades and start getting some of the people out. Then you can find the other liars in there and start getting them out. But Congress has to hold Congress accountable. The people, we could try to convince them to resign. We could picket them and say, quit your job, we hate you, go away, whatever. But unless they do resign, Congress has to hold them accountable. So what are you going to say about stock trades?
So I'd heard a report the other day that Congress did better than all the experts in 2023 on Wall Street.
Right. We were talking about some of it at the end of 2023, but now we have the full picture.
So it travels from Mitch McConnell, who's the very bottom of the list, Republican.
So he sucks at stock trades,
Yes.
but his sucking is still better than others?
18%.
Oh, geez. That's pretty gosh darn good sucking at your job.
Well, he's a Republican. Democrat Brian Higgins was at 100, and it looks like 124%.
No. Brian Higgins is not at 124%. Brian Higgins is at 238.9%.
That's why I ordered new glasses.
Yes, because who is it? Mark Green, Republican, is at 122%, and that's the next closest.
Yeah, I was surprised that Nancy Pelosi and her husband are down midstream, I think, in the 60s or 70s.
Richard Blumenthal, John Rutherford, Ron Wyden, Seth Moulton, David Rouser, Garrett Graves, Mark Green, and then Brian Higgins are apparently all doing better than Nancy Pelosi at 65.5% for Pelosi. This is disgusting.
Yes, and that 65.5% for her is in the millions. So imagine what it is for the top dog, Brian Higgins. Well, the crazy thing is even Marjorie Taylor Greene is on this list.
Congress should not be allowed to do single stock trades. Neither should their family members, because guaranteed they will go talk to the first family member that doesn't have to report in their group.
Yeah, surprised.
And have them make the trades.
Even former Navy SEAL with one eye.
Oh, yes,
Texas,
out of Texas.
Mr. Dan Crenshaw is on this list at 38%.
This is sad. And another reason why single stock should not be allowed. Is AOC on there? I didn't see her name when I was going down, but it was a quick look down the list.
Her name is not on this list.
She is one that has...
She could still be below 18%, below Mitch McConnell, but...
She is one that has repeatedly said that Congress shouldn't be able to do single stock
maybe
trades.
She's not on there at all. So maybe there's one part of her that we can like, that she has a little bit of honesty there.
Yes. The other part of her that I don't like is make all people who are legally residing in the United States legal now. Give them citizenship. That is one...
Well, let's not and say we did.
One bus that I won't jump on.
Let's send them back and say we didn't. So I strongly believe, well, I don't strongly believe, I've rattled this around in my empty head for many years, is I think that, tongue-in-cheek people, we should take our 82nd and 101st Airborne and our military. We should drop them in on Mexico's southern border while simultaneously knocking down all border fences all the way across between Mexico and the U.S., and then march to the capital and take over Mexico and make it our part of our country. Blend them as one. Border security in the middle, done. And I told somebody that once before, and at first they thought I was nuts. But then when they started to look at it, I said, that might not be a bad idea.
So one of the things, speaking of what Mexico wants, the Mexican president has demanded money to help with immigration. He has demanded $20 billion and work permits for 10 million Hispanics in exchange for immigration help. Apparently Mexico won't follow the law, even follow their own laws, unless the United States gives them $20 billion. This is ridiculous. Enforce the immigration laws now.
Yes, tell them jump in line.
And for everyone that they can't return to their home country, send them back to Mexico, because that's where they came through. That make it their problem. See what happens when they have just as many millions of people that have been crossing. They are allowing this to happen. They are doing it on purpose. $20 billion? You think that that's going to go to make their immigration work? No, because they've also asked for work permits for 10 million Hispanics. If they need work permits for 10 million Hispanics, they know what is going on. Also, they know that that money will flow back into Mexico.
100%.
So this is ridiculous. We need to enforce the laws. We're not saying new laws. We're saying enforce the laws. And another thing that the enforcement would met out is, or one of the things along the lines of enforcement, because they're not enforcing the laws, Texas decides that they are going to make sure laws are followed. And now the feds are threatening to sue Texas over the state law that enables the arrest of illegal immigrants.
I'd tell them to sue me and I'd ignore them.
And they're suing over having a border fence, putting up that floating border fence on the Rio Grande. The federal government is not doing its job. Texas is attempting to take care of itself, and the federal government is saying this is not allowed. So you know what? Supporting Texas all the way. This is Biden's critical failing. And we are seeing people from all over the world who are military fighting age go through our southern border. Military fighting age. You might not believe in wars. You might not want a war, but you know what? Men of military fighting age who hate this country are coming in.
It's coming to a theater near you.
Yeah, I guess you can call it the U.S. theater.
Yes.
Instead of the European theater,
US
we're
theater
bringing
of
it
operations
here because there are thousands of Africans who are flying into Central America and then traveling up to the United States. And another thing that we're doing is we are giving them millions of dollars. We are handing out thousands of dollars per person. We are helping to fund all of these criminals who are bringing the coyotes who are bringing them across the border. We are participating in human trafficking by not stopping this, not enforcing our own laws, and not returning people to their country of origin. And I know it was a joke, but there was a comedian years ago that said they would fly them to other countries. So if you speak Spanish, maybe drop them off in China. If you speak Japanese, drop them off in insert other country here, Brazil.
That'll work perfectly.
But Chicago was not happy with all of the migrant buses that have been dropping people off. And in fact, Chicago suburbs have voted to restrict buses from dropping off migrants without notice, while officials in New Jersey are trying to figure out how to deal with their buses.
Well, they were already having problems with their own financial situations, the ability to pay their rents and pay their heat and pay their fuel bills and their cars and just everyday things that sustain life. And then you compact in another 100,000 or 200 or 300 or 5. But wait a minute. They're one of the blue states that said we are a sanctuary. Come one, come all. That's why the Statue of Liberty's there.
Right, New York. New York, their mayor said it. Governor Hochul said it. You had the mayor of Chicago that said it. All of these places that said we're sanctuaries are getting upset that people are getting bused to their sanctuary place. Why are you upset? Shouldn't you be glad they're not living in that squalor of red stateness?
Yeah, how many went to Martha's Vineyard? 50?
And they were overwhelmed and shipped them to Rhode Island.
They should have just given them jobs as butlers and, gas attendants, things like. Just kidding. I'm only teasing.
But over and over again, we send million. By the way, the United States actually already sends millions of dollars to other countries to stop
To
this.
all these countries where they're coming from. Absolutely.
And is it working? No. So how about we stop and we start enforcing our laws? But it's just, it's crazy. And even our immigration system, it does need reform. Reform doesn't mean give status to everyone. But there are some men that have been arrested because they were staging armed robberies so the victims could get immigration benefits. We have a crime victims visa. So if you were the victim of the crime or witnessed the crime and you cooperate with police, you can actually get status here in the United States. You can get a green card. And it was to encourage people who are unlawfully residing here to help with crime problems and put people in jail.
Well, all my relatives that came over from Europe and went through Ellis Island and did it properly and legally for the time, I am going to their grave sites this weekend, and I am going to give every single one of them a tongue lashing for not just coming over.
Doing whatever it is you wanted to do.
Oh, wait a minute. You couldn't get away with it back then. You actually had to show you had money.
Yes.
Or the ability to make money.
And in fact, some of our family got stopped at Ellis Island for being public charges until they could show that they had enough money. The person who was bringing them over had enough money to support them. And that was before we actually had a lot of government assistance, because we're talking the early 1900s, but they were stopped for being public charges. So, yeah, it happens, and we held people to account in the past.
See, this is another horse that these government officials have been riding since before Ronald Reagan. And they're never going to fix it because it gives them a sounding board. It gives them something to whine about. It helps them get extra voters because they have to replace the ones that have left the country, the ones that have passed away, and the ones that switch parties. It's very unfortunate.
It absolutely is. And here in California, I would not be surprised if we start seeing our major influx. We've heard a lot about Chicago. We've heard a lot about New York. And we've heard Los Angeles try to look into suing the state of Texas for kidnapping individuals and dropping them off in Los Angeles. But California has come out and said you're going to get free medical care if you are illegal and you're residing here in the United States. We're not doing that for United States citizens.
I'm surprised that U.S. citizens have not gotten together in their region, like state by state, and filed class action lawsuits.
Because a lot of times you have to have permission to sue.
You got to have standing, right?
You have to have standing. You have to have permission to sue the government, and you have to have standing to do it. And so many times they say, oh, you're just a citizen. You have no standing. We get to do whatever we want to do. So that's what's happening here in California. Is now illegal immigrants are going to get whatever health care they want. Oh, you want a sex change operation? Sure, here's our tax dollars. Oh, you want drugs? Here's our tax dollars. You want whatever you want.
Yeah, you have to work. You have to pay for your own insurance. You have to pay your own deductibles. Then you have to pay for somebody else that you don't even know is medical.
Oh, and you're $68 billion in debt.
Just like...
Or deficit. We don't even have enough money. Sure, let's add billions more.
Just like my little Find My Cell Phone, I want to track and make sure that person's taking care of it. I want to find the person that I'm paying for medically that's not from this country, that's not a U.S. citizen, and make sure they're not smoking, they're not drinking, they're eating healthy. They are using that medical and going to the doctor on a regular basis. And I think that if you look at the sum total of these parts, these do-good people think that this is for the children. They're helping the children. They're helping the children. And when, like you said, you have mostly fighting age men coming to the country, it's not about the children. I don't know why Gavin Newsom and any single Democrat in the House of Representatives at the state level or the Senate would vote for this. They've got something upstairs that's askew, and they're mentally off target.
Very much so.
You know who else is mentally off target?
Who?
Dick Cheney's daughter.
Yes. She is. Absolutely. 100%.
Well, I'm beginning to believe that we're either getting a bait and switch, the rope-a-dope, or some kind of crud from D.C. and this January 6th thing. Do you know who Clay Higgins is?
Sounds familiar, but at this point, I'm going to say no.
Okay, well, he's a congressman from Louisiana's 3rd District in the U.S. House of Representatives. He is an Army veteran, former Army law enforcement officer, and a former police officer. Here's the interesting thing. You look at one website, he's a perfect model citizen. You look at something like Wikipedia, he's done so many bad things, and I know that the person can actually write their own bio if they want to on Wikipedia, but he's done so many bad things. I'm surprised that he's in Congress. The interesting thing is he's been on multiple committees in Congress. He's on one right now, a select committee looking into criminal activity within the federal government. That'd be what, high crimes and misdemeanors for the president?
Possibly.
Yet, he should not be in Congress if he's as bad as Wikipedia and these others make him out to be. The reason I reference him is because some guy that has a couple followers, his name's Tucker Carlson. I know he only has a couple more than us. Maybe we're tied now. Anyway, so he was on Tucker Carlson's show a few nights ago. And they were talking about January 6th because that seems to be a topic of discussion again because several more people were arrested.
Well, and a few days ago, we just had the
anniversary.
3rd anniversary of January 6th.
Well, he backwalked this to almost a year prior.
Are we 2023 or are we talking 2020? January 2020 or 2023? Which year prior?
So 1 year prior to 2020, before it actually happened.
So in 2020, because 2021 is when it happened. So we're talking 2020.
2020.
Okay, I just wanted to know which year prior.
The FBI was already hooking up with groups online and trying to sway them and change their minds and get them during the inauguration, whichever way it went, and the vote, trying to stir people up quite a bit. And they were pretty successful, as you can tell.
Absolutely.
So then the two of them went into, well, how many FBI agents were in Trump MAGA clothing at D.C.? This congressman said that he has a clearance, so he cannot talk about certain things because they may be trying to get charges brought against governmental people. Okay, even though DOJ won't do anything, they have enough to send it to DOJ for prosecution. So he can't say too much. But he did say his number is over 200 FBI agents. Stirring people up.
Stirring the pot.
And there was also agents there. He explained that you can't go into those buildings and know your way around, even if you work there like he does. He goes through a certain door because it's all like a maze. He gets lost and has to get assistance. And he's been there, I think, 4 years.
So some of what I've been seeing, now talking about January 6th, some of what I've been seeing are the videos as they make their way out into the public. And they're putting them into clips or they are showing certain scenes. There have been investigations on what happened to specific people or with specific people at the Capitol. And we've seen some of that. So I do apologize and I should work at remembering his name, but Mr. Bullwinkle, QAnon shaman. So there's more video of him has come out where he's being escorted around and you just see all of them walking together with Capitol Police or other police officers, and they are escorting him to different places. We've seen the videos where they said, okay, treat it respectfully. And they said, yes, of course, guys, don't break anything. Don't do anything. Treat it respectfully. And then there's been some videos of the outside of what's gone on. And while people were chanting or shouting, they weren't attacking anyone. They weren't attacking police officers. And mind you, there were different situations happening all across the Capitol. So one person's experience might not be the same as another person's experience. But there was a point where people were chanting and saying their slogan and stuff. And then all of a sudden, the police officers fire pepper spray and start basically riling up the crowd and agitating them intentionally. Where there was no reason to pepper spray at that time, they decided to pepper spray. Where people got trapped in the tunnel area and there was nowhere for them to move. The crush of the crowd was pushing them forward and they're trying to go back and they can't. While people were stuck, not moving and not attacking police officers, they were sprayed in the face. And there was a woman and they've done kind of an investigation into her. Ultimately, she ended up pleading guilty to stop her, this continual prison threatening and what they were going to do to her, etc., where she is trapped in the tunnel and you can watch the police officers, multiple, while she is not hitting, striking, or doing anything, hands down to her side. She's not assaulting anyone. She gets assaulted by the police over and over and over while she's trapped. She does try to bring up her hands to block her face as she's getting hit over and over and over again in the head and in the back. They're using the batons. She can't move. She can't do anything. And they beat her all over her body, her head, her back. She does not strike the officers one time. And then they mace her in the face repeatedly.
Oh, you mean kind of like the lady that was climbing up the wall to get in the window?
Ashley.
There was police on the inside and police on the outside, and they shot and killed her.
Yes.
And like that. And he talked about that a little bit.
Unarmed.
Yes, and he also talked about the fact that a lot of the Capitol Police, and they have email documentation, according to him, to corroborate everything he was saying, that the FBI convinced the Capitol Police to play along with them as well.
So some of what was said in court and the court cases where the people were ultimately convicted and they had a police officer who was speaking to what happened. The video that has now been released of this particular area and incident shows that the police officer lied and what he said happened didn't actually happen. And there's a female police officer that was seen beating an unconscious woman. She's on the ground and she's unconscious and she gets beaten by this police officer. She was given a commendation for her actions. And so I understand that if someone is striking you as a police officer, you may strike back and you can stop the assault and you may attempt to arrest or, there's a lot that can go on with that. But tell me when you're allowed to beat unconscious people who never assaulted you, who weren't striking you, but you're allowed to beat unconscious people. She ultimately died.
According to Congressman Higgins, never.
And we saw actions across the country from May of 2020 on, and we still see them today. We still see it in the Free Palestine movement. We see it in different movements where people are able to assault police officers and have all the charges drop, where people firebomb a police station and they decide not to go forward with the charges, where people have assaulted citizens because they didn't like that citizens were on the freeway stuck in traffic, so they started going around and breaking their windows and beating them inside their cars while they're trapped there. We saw people murdered. And yet here we are, January 6th, and we say this is the worst event, but the police officers did every single thing right.
It's the worst event since the Civil War.
And
got news for you. Almost 1 million people died during the Civil War, so it's not even close.
And we have, and just to, I don't know, I'm just to reiterate, just to bring up another situation where a federal judge has upheld a year-long prison sentence for a January 6th demonstrator after admitting that the demonstrator was neither violent nor destructive. Presence got this person a year-long prison sentence. And now, as of January 6, 2024, they are going after people who attended the Stop the Steal rally who were on Capitol grounds in the Capitol area. That, remember, they geofenced who was there for cell records and stuff like that, and who never entered the Capitol building itself. And they are giving hundreds of years to people if you take their collective prison sentences, where people destroyed property, firebombed, attacked police officers. But as long as it wasn't on January 6th, hands off.
Well, if this congressman is legitimate, and his committee really does have this evidence, they need to start releasing it, and they need to start sending it to DOJ or whoever. Just keep continually, because what's going to happen, just like Hunter Biden and them, the statute of limitations is going to run out. It's going to be all lip service, and we're going to do nothing but see a bunch of people sit and rot in prison for doing what? Speaking their First Amendment rights.
And if you remember, we have several congressmen who said that the assemblies have to be peaceful. Who said the protesting had to be peaceful? And I'm not talking about January 6th. I'm talking about what has happened the last 3 years in this country, across the country, including inside of our Capitol building. As long as it wasn't on January 6th, they have no problem with people taking over the Capitol, assaulting people in the Capitol. As long as it is tied to Trump people, they're the bad guy. Orange man bad. This is how they're going to try to take down Trump. But when it's tied to any other group or party, they do not care. They will allow it to happen. They are not prosecuting people to the full extent of the law. We had a congressman who pulled a fire alarm and disrupted a vote that was going on. And what were these people charged with? Disrupting Congress. So if disruption of Congress is a chargeable offense, everybody who disrupts Congress needs to be charged, no matter when it is.
He should be in prison for at least a year, right?
Yeah, so it's just, if you have peaceful protesters, just in general, they might be chanting, they might be yelling, they could be upset, but they are not attacking anyone, they are not targeting anyone, and they are standing there just picketing, saying, you guys suck, whatever it is that they wish to say, whatever their message is. And then you go up and you start laying in with the pepper spray, pepper balls, dispersing the crowd. If you didn't tell them to disperse, or even if you told them to disperse, are they required? I don't know. Is that one of those things? Are you required to disperse? We didn't give you permission to protest, therefore you're not allowed to protest ever. Is that really a thing in our country?
It appears it is.
And then if we have one of the things that I had heard before, so maybe I should research our laws a little bit more just to make sure that I am in fact correct on this stance. But you cannot be in a conspiracy with the government, is my understanding. So if it's a government official acting undercover and they get you to do something and you're charged with conspiracy to XYZ, it is my understanding you cannot be in a conspiracy with the government. So if the government had been working to upset, rile, anger, cause to rise up, set in motion, we saw the taking down of barriers, and yet, Mr. Ray Epps out of Arizona didn't get charged. When they're talking about charging people for mere presence in the area and how bad they are and how they want to take them down, but yet Ray Epps can be seen on video over and over again, and they're only going to charge him with a little tiny misdemeanor in the background.
Well, I think if they were on television, if they were sitting at home watching it on television, they should be charged. I think if they were even thinking about it, they should be charged.
Got to get the thought police involved, right?
That's how silly this is. And it's amazing that if there were that many FBI agents and Secret Service and Capitol Police and CIA agents involved in this mass conspiracy, then the January 6th committee is a fraud, just like a lot of other fraudulent things that take place here in the country. And we should see all the evidence. We need to see all the videos. We need to speak with every single person in the public purview. We need to actually not do it behind closed doors. Let's hear everybody. Let's hear what they have to say. Even if you have to lie detector them, even if it's not admissible, let's lie detector Pelosi. And that.
You mean Pelosi, the person who declined to have the National Guard after it was offered? That Pelosi?
That would be the one that's very good at stock trades. But you know what? We've been having personal issues with people not getting along in this country and rioting and protesting probably since the advent of this country. But it seems to be getting worse. And it seems that one side over the other enjoys stirring these people up to where they do what they did for quite a while, which is burn buildings down, burn towns down, burn police stations down, flip car, all the stuff we've seen over the last few years.
So we've seen a record number of police shot, by the way. When we've been denouncing the police, hating on the police, 2023 saw a 60% increase looking from 2018 to present. So a 60% increase. We are wanting to defund them more. We hate them more. We decide it's okay to attack them. So we have a record number of police shot. And then we see our crime go up while we're being told it's not really, really up. It's only kind of up, but you know, it's because people don't have groceries or whatever other excuse they make for running down to a local store and taking away all of their inventory. So we're told over and over again that certain types of crimes are okay, but other types of crimes are not okay. In March of 2020, what were we told? We needed to lock down, shut down, because it was for our own health and for our own good, and we can't congregate, don't see grandma, you're going to kill grandma. If you go, you're going to get them sick, you need to lock into your house, don't go to school, don't go to work, unless you're absolutely essential, mask up, all of that stuff. That's what we heard. But then in May of 2020, after the unfortunate events in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we saw thousands of people take to the streets between marching. There were people who marched, but then there were people who destroyed property, burned property, whatever else that they wanted to do. And in some cases, it led to murder. And when that happened, we were told that that was acceptable.
Yes. The extreme masketeer, Fauci, said it was okay.
Right. So while it may be okay to practice your First Amendment rights, we were told we had no First Amendment rights when it came to locking down this country and taking care of our health, except when. Then they give us this nice little carve out. Now, if you want to protest and say no mask, man, you were on the wrong side of history and you needed to be taken out and taken down. Over and over, we were told certain types of things are okay, but if you do the very same thing in a different kind of way, then that's not okay. But what did we have come out who just gave a nice little Q&A and health update, so to speak? We had Is
it Mr. Collins?
Mr. Collins. Yes, he was talking about the public health mindset. And in his public health mindset, he was speaking at a 2023 gathering of Braver Angels, a nonprofit designed to lessen American political polarization by bringing people of differing viewpoints together. Collins admitted that he and others did not consider viewpoints outside of their tunnel, their zip code, their area, and that everybody else suggesting anything else, they would not accept. He said, I'm going to quote him here, as a guy living inside the Beltway, feeling a sense of crisis, trying to decide what to do in some situation room in the White House with people who had data that was incomplete, we weren't really thinking about what that would mean to a family in Minnesota, 1,000 miles away from where the virus was hitting so hard. We weren't really considering the consequences in communities that were not New York City or some other big city. So they got their tunnel vision. They got to say who was right. They got to say who was wrong. And then they started publicly attacking anyone who didn't wholly agree with them no matter what. And so there was a scientist who came out and said, there's a little bit more you need to consider here. And instead of looking at some of the other ways for them to consider what was going on, they decided to label anyone else as a fringe component of epidemiology, and their ideas were dangerous. So they made themselves judge, jury, and executioner, and then they attacked any person, judged them and attacked them, who did not wholly agree with them, even if it turned out that they were right. The damage was done. So they didn't care about you living in rural America. They didn't care about Minnesota. They only considered themselves and people similarly situated to them. And other than that, everybody need to have the exact same response as them.
The only time, yes, very well spoken. The only time they care about people in the Midwest.
You mean the flyover states?
Yes, is when geopolitically they make a mistake and we have to go to war. And then they have to break glass, insert soldier, go fight and die. That's it. Pay your taxes, shut your mouth, enjoy your pickleball and your cornhole, and just be quiet. Well, there's quite a bit of age difference between us, obviously, being dad and daughter. However, it gets taxing just like the earth pushes down on you and makes you shorter over time. These kind of things give you a shorter fuse, and even though one of the things we do is talk about it weekly and we have fun doing it, is it gets old. It's the same people making the same stupid decisions, and nobody ever holds them to account. They bring somebody in office that works really well for, let's call it a semester or two, or for a term, and then they go off the rails. They either get polluted by money,
Drunk on power.
They get so disgusted themselves, they just back away, retire, whatever. There has to be some type of political shift and reset here, or we might as well just deem this a lost art
and a lost country. Lost country, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely need to do something different. And I do find that many of us us being across the United States, feel the same way about certain things. There are areas where one of us might be a little off to the left or a little off to the right, but for the most part, we all kind of meet in the center on most issues. But what our government needs is to polarize us, so that way we will stick to the one or two things we're very passionate about and then go that direction. So if you're super passionate about the climate, you're going to be vote blue no matter who. If you're super passionate about the right to life, you're going to vote red until you're dead type of scenario or situation. And we shouldn't have to be so polarized, because most of us, again, fall along the same sort of center pathway. And if you even look at the vast majority of people, I should say the majority of people inside the United States, religious or otherwise, do believe in the right to abortion. Now, not everybody agrees with that. Some people are super right on the issue and super left, no abortions ever and abortions all the time. But the vast majority of people in the United States believe in abortion up to the end of the first trimester, 13 weeks. And then when you get from 13 to 27 weeks, there are less people who agree with that, but more of a medical necessity they agree with. But if you look at the vast majority of people, they are not in the camp of on-demand abortion, no matter where you are in your pregnancy. But yet here in California now, somehow that is our way of living.
Yes, and isn't it interesting, though, as you were talking, my mind was just, here you go, drifting off again, that Planned Parenthood, which is a pro-abortion clinic, was founded by an anti-black woman.
A very racist woman.
Yes.
Who basically wanted to do her version of eugenics, and that is why abortion clinics were put in the poor working areas inside the United States, because those are the people that she did not, poor areas, those are the people that she did not believe should have children. So she wanted to regulate how many children they have. And now what do? We have convinced ourselves that she was this savior who was supporting women's rights.
And that's why you're right. And I was going to say that the vast majority of people in America believe that abortion is okay only because their mind has been trained.
We've been conditioned to believe that
yes.
it's a women's rights issue, my body, my choice.
Yes. And had it never been brought up to begin with, that thing where you don't know what you don't know, or if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, do you hear it? Or does anybody hear it?
So not only are we my body, my choice, or brought up to a certain issue, we've also dehumanized the baby, and we say it's a clump of cells. We've been told it's not a real thing, it's not a real human, until it can be on its own. It doesn't really even count as a soul type of thing. And so we get told this, and people have bought into that. Oh, it's just a clump of cells. Oh, it can't survive outside of the womb. Okay. But you can be 40 weeks pregnant, you can give birth, and that baby cannot survive without intervention from somebody, whether it's from mom feeding the baby for 6 months of life, formula. If we left that baby in the cradle and did nothing for him or her, that baby is not going to go get itself some food.
Right. I don't believe there's a reptile or a mammal out there
that instantaneous
born,
to
yes,
birth
can survive instantaneous. There may be one or two, but I don't think there's many.
Right. We have, okay, so looking at baby birds, right? Mama goes and gets the food and then regurgitates it for the baby. And how many mammals need to have milk, etc. So saying that, oh, it can't survive, well, then we can go the opposite way with that too. Once you're of a certain age, or if you have a medical emergency, or if you get bopped in the head and you're unconscious and you need medical interventions, theoretically, we can start to say, if you can't take care of yourself, no right to life, right? We can just let you go.
Yes. Well, isn't it amazing how complicated all this stuff is? And we think we put experts in place to handle these sort of things, and they all tend to botch things and make them absolutely worse. And you can just go right down the list, as we've done, homeless and this abortion thing and all these different names now.
Right. Let's take away Narcan. So if somebody takes too much drugs, why are we going around encouraging people to have Narcan on hand?
Just call it post-birth abortion.
Right. And this is what I fully disagree with. Carry the Narcan, help the people, help somebody who's in need. Absolutely. You have a right to life regardless of your age. And I just don't understand how somebody can dehumanize another to a certain point where you're just accepting of it. Oh, no, they're just a clump of cells. You don't stop being a clump of cells until you're allowed to be born.
Again, that's because we've let right become wrong and wrong become right.
So
in all aspects, all facets of life.
So let's talk about something that's wrong. A Biden official has been arrested on charges of abusing a dementia patient. And no, we're not talking about
Joe?
Biden. I knew you were going to say that. So she's a TSA official, and she is the Assistant Federal Security Director of the TSA, Maxine McManaman. She was arrested by U.S. Customs and Border Protection because she was coming off of a international flight on a warrant for one count of forgery, a third-degree felony, and she's being detained until she can be extradited to the right county. The investigation began in April of 2023 and involved the exploitation of a family member with dementia. The investigation determined that on December 5th, 2022, a quitclaim deed was prepared by Maxine and stated that, and I won't get into all the details, but basically when it was supposed to have been signed, it could not have happened because that person was not in that location. So they determined that it was to her benefit. She was basically giving herself the house. And so there have been charges against her and another individual in relation to that count for exploitation of the elderly.
So she cheated like the others cheat.
It reminds me of the Kealoas in Hawaii because they did some of that nonsense. Among other things, there was a lot that they did, but abusing a power of attorney.
Did they have burner phones?
They probably had burner phones.
I learned that terminology during all my years of watching Hawaii Five-0.
Absolutely.
And NCIS Hawaii. And Magnum PI.
Oh, you seem to have a thing for the island.
I do. I love it, but it's too expensive.
Unfortunately, that is true. It has gone very expensive. As if it wasn't already expensive, it's gone up even more.
So I think that this Congressman Clay Higgins, I'm going to email him tomorrow. That I would like to actually chat with him, whether it's via text, email, or in person, or over the phone, to see if he's legitimate. I'm going to send an unsolicited request.
They'll probably say that you're not one of our people.
I don't have standing.
Yeah, I've gotten that before when I've been trying to get help with like the VA and stuff like that. I actually reached out to my congressperson, my senators. I even at one point asked for Newsom's help. And then I messaged every single person on the Veterans Committee in Congress for both the Senate and the House. I sent a letter to everyone. Not everyone responded. In fact, I did not get responses from everyone, but those who did respond told me, hey, you're not in my jurisdiction.
You don't have standing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, and then, of course, my congressman quit. He resigned. So then the follow-up didn't end up happening. And it was always, oh, well, we'll send on your request to somebody else.
We'll blow you off and let somebody else worry about it.
It'll also blow you off, yeah.
It's just a statistic.
So a couple more pieces of information have come out. The DNC is not too happy with New Hampshire right now. So New Hampshire has always been the first state. They like to hold their primaries first, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. Well, the DNC decided that it wasn't going to be New Hampshire. It was going to be South Carolina. They did it for equity and inclusion. So they wanted it to be South Carolina. But New Hampshire said, hey, this has been our thing for many years. We're not changing. We're going to be first. So then the DNC has rules and bylaws. Their committee co-chairs have written a letter to New Hampshire and said that the event on January 23rd, 2024 cannot be used as the first determining stage of the state's delegate selection process and is considered detrimental. So anything that happens on January 23rd will be a non-binding presidential preference event and is meaningless for the Democrat Party. Thank you. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
So what they're saying is, it doesn't matter what you do.
We're not going to recognize you.
We have enough mail-in ballots now, almost a year before the election, to win. So don't sweat it. We're going to do what we do. You do what you do. We'll see you in November.
Pretty much. At least that's the way it feels. But yeah, so they want to be able to tell. It's funny that the Democrat Party is going to tell the states how to run their voting. I thought the states had the right to determine how they were going to run their voting.
Well,
so now we're hearing that the Democrat Party has the ultimate right of considering or not considering votes and delegates.
Well, they're pretty powerful. Look what they did to Bernie Sanders. Look what they did to the other Democrats. Look what they did to the lady I really like, Tulsi Gabbard.
Right.
They kneecapped her hard. They kneecapped her so hard she left the party.
Yep, now she's independent.
Now she is.
Didn't she go to New Hampshire? Oh, maybe she wants to be the first in state.
There you go.
In voting. So another thing that we saw over this past week, which was absolutely bonkers in my mind, was Alaska Airlines. They had a panel completely blow out of the plane while it was in the air. Luckily, the two closest seats to that panel were unoccupied when it happened. That panel landed in Oregon in a person's backyard, did not hit the person. It landed in their backyard. And 2 cell phones were sucked out of the airplane with it. They were in working condition when found.
That's amazing, isn't it? That says a lot about the little kids, the 8 and 9-year-olds that built those phones. They did a fantastic job.
Oh, God, you're terrible.
We should give them a bonus.
They should get a bonus.
Yes, and I was surprised watching that article on all news outlets that not one newscaster mentioned that plug falling from 14,000 feet and potentially killing somebody on the ground.
Right.
We're so fortunate, they're so fortunate, they're in Oregon, that it fell in the person's backyard. And
no one was in there. Yep.
Let me add a little bit to it as well, because I spoke to I work for an airline, by the way, and I spoke to some of our A&Ps this morning, and it is a good thing, there is a good thing or a good outcome with this, that plug or that potential door part of the airplane on climb out at 12,000 feet or 14,000, whatever it was, had they made it to their cruise altitude, and you can look it up on FlightAware to see what their cruise altitude was going to be going from Portland to SoCal, it was probably going to be in the 31,000 foot range-ish. There would have been multiple people sucked out of that hole. There would have been a much different outcome.
So it's a good thing it happened where it happened.
It's a good thing it happened where it happened.
Yeah, not just where it landed to. So It is very thankful that on January 5th, the accident involving Alaska Airlines Boeing 737-9 MAX did not... It basically had the best outcome that it could possibly have from that happening. Now, Alaska grounded all of its planes that were of the same category, 737-9 MAX. United has done the same. In fact, I believe the U.S. government has issued a grounding of all similar aircraft.
Yes.
And they have started checking each aircraft to make sure that it is serviceable and...
Right. They need to see where the flaw lies, or if this was just a one-off. Hopefully it's just a one-off and those bolts didn't get tightened, or there was metal fatigue or something.
Now, as of right now, the possibility exists that there's installation issues, is what they are calling it. United Airlines has said that they have found loose bolts and other installation issues in some of the door plugs of the Boeing 737 MAX 9 plane. So they are hopeful that this grounding will help to identify what the exact issue is, and they can fix it.
And they'll fix it quick. They'll get an EA engineering authorization. They'll repair that pretty quick. All airlines will. I just, can you imagine the stories at that 13, I think he was 13.
Well, if he was sitting in the exit row, he needed to be at least 15, unless that wasn't technically an exit row.
It wasn't. That is not an exit row. Okay. When you configure it to the amount of seats that Delta and United, not Delta, scratch that, when Alaska and United have them configured to, which is 174 to 8 passengers, those particular emergency exits are not required. So there's one there and there's one on the direct opposite side on the airframe.
Okay.
So they build a custom plug that gets bolted in place. That way, if they sell the aircraft or they decide to change the interior
they can make it
they can put emergency exit doors in.
So because it was a plug,
yes,
the person wasn't required to be
correct
an emergency exit
qualified. There was not somebody sitting right next to that bulkhead, but there was the kid in the center seat, and somehow his shirt got sucked off of him.
Shirt, phone, and I believe that there was indication that he appeared red or looked red.
Well, just imagine how cold it was at 14,000 feet climbing out like that. I mean, and that's why I say at 31,000-ish, there would have been so many more different issues. I mean, it's below freezing at that altitude. There's a lot more movement. It would have been bad. Yeah,
so very thankful that what happened did happen. And another thing that we saw as far as what has happened with airlines and issues, there was a plane crash in Tokyo Haneda Airport. A Japan Airlines flight collided with a Japan Coast Guard Dash 8 plane on the runway. It appears that the Coast Guard plane made an incursion, but there's still a lot more investigations to go on into that.
Someone was saying to that they didn't have permission to taxi out on the active runway.
But there was no stop line, and there was a lot going on with that.
And both the pilot and FO on that Dash 8, the Coast Guard plane, are saying they both heard from the tower or from ground to go ahead and taxi out.
So tower's saying they were at fault. They're saying tower. So, well, that the investigation, time will tell. That's one of those things. But there was an A350 that was the Japan Airlines. All 379 passengers and crew on board that plane survived the accident. And what they're saying is the drilling in of safety on that plane and what their flight crew did and how everybody listened to instructions was where it was at to get everybody safely going out, because after they got everybody out and everybody safe, that plane did go up in a fireball. So
yes, it did.
A combination of modern safety standards and Japan Airlines' own rigorous safety culture, which grew out of an unfortunate incident that had happened 40 years prior. August 12, 1985, a Japan Airline flight from Tokyo to Osaka crashed and killed 520 out of the 524 on board. At that time, it said a faulty repair of the tail by Boeing technicians, not the airlines. Oh, Boeing.
Boeing seems to have a history.
They need to.
Unfortunately, because they have great airplanes and they're having some issues here lately. But the factory that's in Kansas, I believe, they spun that off and sold it. So it's actually a different company now. It's
not really theirs. So Japan Airlines realized that they needed to make sure that they constantly keep up on the best techniques. And there were some people who were filming inside of the plane, and everybody basically listened. Nobody tried to take their luggage and go out and not listen to what was going on. So if we think back to what happened with the bird strike there in New York with A Miracle on the Hudson, having people listen, following active procedures, listening to the flight attendants doing what they're supposed to do, you see safety going out. When we had the one crash, I think it was in San Francisco, the death was somebody running out in front of the fire truck, not listening to safety procedures type of deal. So, hey, if something unfortunate does happen, listen to the flight attendants. And I highly, highly encourage everyone to read that safety card.
And listen to your safety briefing.
And it doesn't matter how many times you've flown. As Mark pointed out earlier, aircraft configurations can change. Your best exit can change. Depending on how far back you're sitting, it can change. And because there were certain exits blocked, given the way they were hit, your nearest exit may now be different.
Case in point, 777 going from San Francisco to Guam has one configuration based on, believe it or not, the general height of the passengers are X. They tend to be, and going to Japan, so they tend to be a little shorter, so they can put in more seats. So the briefing cards and the configuration of the airplane's a little bit different from 777 going San Fran, New York.
So make sure you pay attention to those cards and listen to your briefing. Even with my children, we talk about what to do in case of emergency. So if you talk about it over and over again, you listen over and over again, it might take a little bit, but it'll get drilled into your head.
27 times.
1,000 times.
According to psychologists, 27 times, and it's in your head forever.
Really?
Yes.
So make sure you repeat that briefing card 27
times.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.